And I feel like the fact that I wasn't able to specifically open a dermatology practice has been an absolute blessing in disguise because really deep down, dermatology is not on an island, like our whole body, everything is connected, our mental health. So I'm also certified in psychiatry, and it's because I'm passionate about mental health because that affects what comes out in our skin, what's inside of our bodies. It's all connected. And so I feel blessed to have this opportunity to kind of force myself to immerse myself in the primary care component. But yes, it is just really wonderful to be able to actually go back to practicing healthcare like I feel like it should be.
Welcome back to The In Factor, the show that highlights the stories of entrepreneurial thinkers who are forging their own paths with courage, clarity, and conviction. I'm Dr. Rebecca White, your host, and today's guest is an inspiring example of someone who turned frustration into freedom and transformed a career in healthcare into a mission-driven business. Patricia Delgado is an autonomous nurse practitioner based in St. Petersburg, Florida, and the founder of Sunrise Skin and Wellness, a holistic skin and wellness practice offering individualized care in what is often an impersonal healthcare system. I think we all have had that feeling of being a number in the healthcare system, but Patricia is trying to overcome that. And she's also the founder of a nonprofit, which is Sunrise NPPA Derm, which supports other nurse practitioners and physicians assistants through education, empowerment, and community building. I met Patricia at a conference for autonomous nurse practitioners, and I was immediately struck by her authenticity, passion, and entrepreneurial spirit. Her journey is a powerful illustration of what happens when someone refuses to compromise and decides that they want to pursue a solution based on their values and that reflects their vision of care. In this episode, Patricia opens up about the challenges she faced while working in large healthcare systems, including the pressure to prioritize profits over people. She shares why she chose to go out on her own, how she built a lean business that keeps her aligned with her purpose, and the powerful connections she's made through collaboration, not competition. We also talk about how she integrates her dermatology expertise and psychiatric certification to offer care that honors the whole person, not just the symptoms. And as always, I want to take a minute to offer a mindset insight to guide our conversation as you listen today. And it is that entrepreneurship isn't just about starting something new. It can be about reclaiming your voice. In See, Do, Repeat, one of my books, I explore the idea that entrepreneurial thinkers are often those who choose to act when something feels misaligned. They don't wait for someone else to give them permission. They choose themselves. Patricia didn't let regulation, red tape, or rejection stop her. She kept moving forward, building something that reflects both her clinical expertise and her personal integrity. Whether you're in healthcare business or somewhere in between, Patricia's story is a beautiful reminder that the path to purpose is often paved with setbacks, and that sometimes the greatest breakthroughs come just after the biggest roadblocks. And as you listen to this story, if you think of someone else who might be facing a decision and they need permission to choose themselves and not wait to be chosen, I encourage you to share this episode and the entire podcast list with them. Okay, so let's dive into our conversation with Patricia Delgado. Patricia, thank you for joining me on The In Factor.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. White. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I met you. It's been a couple of months now. I mean, time goes by so fast, but I met you at a conference for nurse practitioners who are working independently. I think they call it autonomously. And Florida has some laws that allow that. And you are a nurse practitioner and you have a business in St. Petersburg, Florida called Sunrise Skin and Wellness. And I know you also have a not for profit. We'll get into that here in a little bit, but it was a delight to meet you there. I was very impressed by the whole entire group and by what you do. And so I thought it would be really fun to have you on this podcast where we feature entrepreneurs and just listen to a little bit about your story about how a nurse becomes an entrepreneur and what that journey is like.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So I am a nurse practitioner. And as you mentioned, I'm autonomous. So in Florida, when a nurse practitioner has autonomous licensure, we can open up our own practices, but it has to be a primary care or internal medicine practice. We can't open a specialty practice. So I really wanted to open my own practice. And even though my entire career as a nurse practitioner was in dermatology, I still just opened up a wellness practice. So my company is called Sunrise Skin and Wellness. So there's no mention of dermatology, but I mostly will address medical skincare problems. And I can also do if any of my patients have a primary care concern, I can check their blood pressure, do full physical exams. I help with weight loss and just general wellness. I take a holistic approach to care. But that's how I was able to start my practice in Florida. So it's not a dermatology practice, it is a skin and wellness practice.
But you bring experience as a dermatology nurse previously. So, how did you talk to us a little bit about your career and what does it mean to be a nurse practitioner for our listeners who may not understand? I know there are a lot of licensing, but there's a lot of education, and nurse practitioners now are showing up more and more in our primary care offices and in with our specialty doctors, and then in some states, as we mentioned, autonomously with their own practices. Enlighten us a little on what all that means.
Thank you for asking that question. That's a really good question, and it's a fair question because when we think of nursing, we usually think of nurses in the hospital, at the bedside, and that's how all nurse practitioners, all of our careers started out as being registered nurses. So my career specifically started out working 5 years in critical care. 1.5 of those was in a step down ICU. And then my final 3.5 years were in ICU. It was a multi system ICU. I started my master's program while in my last couple of years working in the hospital. And when I graduated with my master's, that's what made me a nurse practitioner. So basically, most of our experience, most of our education really comes from boots on the ground, working in the hospital, actually doing full head to toe assessments. And then the actual schooling, which is a master's program, is really to fine tune the diagnostic skills, when to order imaging, how to interpret imaging, labs. Really, I mean, I already knew how to interpret labs because we have to know that in the hospital. When our patients' labs come back, we have to know what we're looking at in order to call the doctor. But now, as an actual uh, provider and someone that's able to order our own labs, we need to be honed in those skills even more and what to do with them. So basically, a nurse practitioner is a nurse that goes for further education. And after I got my master's, I did continue to get my doctorate in nursing practice. So it is not a medical doctorate. In fact, nursing and medicine, so physicians are like one whole branch of medicine, and nurses are a whole other branch of medicine. And I knew from my first day in nursing school when they said nurses take care of the person. Nurses don't diagnose or anything. They find out how their diagnosis is affecting their body, is affecting their relationships, and is affecting their role in their communities. And I thought, this is amazing. Like, this just, to me, that's what healthcare should be. It's like taking care of the whole person, you know? So I feel like becoming a nurse practitioner, and as a nurse practitioner, it's like you get to bring the whole thing home, not only doing your full head to toe assessment and taking care of a person and, how they're in their community and how they're doing with their job and their relationships and safety, but also being able to be their, primary care provider or being their head of their specialty. And then, of course, we have our physicians, which are also the leaders in the healthcare world, and we all sort of work as a team.
Yeah, that's really insightful because for a lot of us, and I'll put myself in that category, we show up at our doctor or we, have an emergency and sadly we may end up in the hospital and, there's a whole team of people taking care of us, but we don't always understand their training, their background, what their specialty is. And, as medicine, interestingly, has gotten more and more specialized, we've probably I feel like a lot of people feel like anyway, and I think I do at times too, that the patient has kind of gotten forgotten in all that, and that nurses often are that thread that brings that all back together. They're the ones that are by the bedside. They're the ones that are listening to you or spending more time with you, which a lot of physicians don't seem to have the opportunity to do for whatever reason. I don't want to point any fingers, but I know that it feels like, your nurse is the one that you can actually talk to and that will spend time with you. When you go from being, I guess, RN is the registered nurse, and that's how a lot of people start in this field. And then they get their master's, as you pointed out, and in your case, a doctorate. As you move through that process, do you feel like that a lot of that opportunity to really provide that, time with the patient, do you lose some of that as a practitioner, or are you able as a nurse practitioner to maintain that? And then the other question is, as you become a nurse practitioner, you're able to also prescribe medication, is that right? Or are there added ways that you can help the patient, I guess?
So I would say that moving from being a registered nurse to eventually getting your master's and becoming a nurse practitioner, throughout that process, I'd say we don't lose that drive and that motivation to still spend time with our patients, and in fact it's almost like energizing and invigorating because now you feel like you can do even more for your patients. As you mentioned, now we can prescribe medications for our patients, or imaging or tests, lab work, biopsies, whatever we feel is appropriate for the patient, in addition to what we already do, which is spend time and educate. But where I see that pressure happening isn't necessarily in the career and the evolution of nursing itself, but it's wherever you end up working. So if you end up working, and this even happens as a registered nurse in the hospital, because they are just these really giant corporations after all. And even my experience in the hospital, unfortunately, I did get burnt out. And I saw us getting treated as numbers, and I saw all the administrative hoops and silly things that don't matter to our patients and their families when it comes to whether or not their family member is going to survive. Oh, make sure you sign the clock on the door. Make sure you round every hour. And it's like, this is ICU. Like, we're literally sitting outside of their room, like watching them like a hawk and, just always doing things. It's like, I'm sorry, I forgot to sign my initials on this clock on the paper on the door. It was just getting to be a little absurd, and then you'd get reprimanded for those things, and it's like, we're here saving people's lives, and that's what you're gonna bring to my attention. It's just silly things like that. So, as a nurse practitioner, I knew personally I did not wanna work in the hospital again. But so you can work in these outpatient settings, and depending on who you work for, that can have an effect on the culture that you are exposed to. And I firmly believe and I have hope in humanity. And I know that all of my colleagues, all of my nurse practitioner and hopefully my physician colleagues as well, when they graduate their programs, they are motivated to help patients, to care for them, to educate them, to share knowledge about their diagnoses and make an impact on the world, and not to see as many patients as possible or to make as much money as possible for the practice that they're working for.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when you work for a private equity company or a giant corporation, the bottom line is money. Like, that's really just the machine. And the goal of the machine is to make money, drive profit, to increase profit for the shareholders and the stakeholders and the executives. And that's just how it is. So that is where I feel like as providers, we can eventually start to change how we practice because at the end of the day, we have to put food on the table. We have to pay our mortgage or our rent. We want to, if we have kids, we want to send our kids to the best schools or be able to buy our kids whatever little things they want or the clothes and take our family on vacation, take care of our aging parents, all these things where we do at some point have to make, or I guess, justify within ourselves changing the way we practice so that we can still pay the bills.
Yeah, as I listen to you talk, what I'm hearing, I think, is that entrepreneurship and becoming an entrepreneur is one pathway to actually control more of that so that you're not, and then maybe that's, I see you smiling, so maybe that's partly why you and many of the other nurse practitioners that I met at that conference are taking the leap into entrepreneurship because they felt like they were being, even though they were getting more skills, as you pointed out, and more licensure and certifications, more opportunities, let's say, to better serve their patient, they were still being boxed in by a system that had too much bureaucracy and had different motives, if you will.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. And that is exactly, you hit the nail on the head as far as why I left my former employer because they got bought out by private equity. And I knew exactly what that meant. And I even wrote a blog post about it and it went viral in my company. And it's funny because as the months went on, it took them 8 months to renegotiate my contract. And it was awful. And the way that they tried to justify them not meeting my requests, all about the numbers, 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 numbers. Apparently, the fact that I saw mostly Medicaid hurt me. They counted that against me. And so yeah, I was like, this is terrible. It's just that's exactly what I thought would happen. So I left. And then as the months went on, when I was building my practice, I of course still see my former coworkers and even some of the pharmaceutical reps are just like, wow, you got out at the right time. It's totally different now. And yeah, it's completely changed the practice. So yeah, and just having freedom over not only how I care for my patients, but how I build my schedule, which again, that kind of depends on where you work as well. But mostly though, how I get to design my practice and how I take care of patients. And I feel like the fact that I wasn't able to specifically open a dermatology practice has been an absolute blessing in disguise because really deep down, dermatology is not on an island, like our whole body, everything is connected, our mental health. So I'm also certified in psychiatry, and it's because I'm passionate about mental health, because that affects what comes out in our skin, what's inside of our bodies. It's all connected. And so I feel blessed to have this opportunity to kind of force myself to immerse myself in the primary care component. But yes, it is just really wonderful to be able to actually go back to practicing healthcare like I feel like it should be.
That it's so interesting listening to you talk because what I'm hearing is that when you met up against obstacles and there are a lot of, healthcare has a lot of, it's regulated very heavily and it's very complex and very challenging sometimes to understand. I mean, it doesn't matter, I have a PhD and I still struggle with everything about my insurance and about the things that really should be pretty simple. So, the only thing that might be worse is filing taxes every year. I don't
Mm.
know, but
Oh, yeah.
we could talk about and complain about those things all day probably. But the reality is, and the interesting thing is we're seeing so many as an entrepreneurship educator, I'm just seeing more and more healthcare professionals turning to this way of approaching what they do that includes entrepreneurship. And it really is, what's interesting is what you identified, that the challenges, the regulatory things, the roadblocks that you met actually paved the way for what you were able to do, which you find now so much better because maybe you're not bound by the restrictions quite as much. And so you're in a skin and wellness facility. I love that you're thinking more holistically because I know that many skin diseases and rashes and challenges come from, you mentioned psychiatry, but I know my brother had eczema, and I can remember that there was a stress eczema relationship. And so he played basketball, and every time he was stressed out about basketball, he might have a small outbreak of that. And it wasn't major. I know a lot of people have have very challenging things associated with skin illnesses, but you have the wellness component. So, and it's kind of, you've got a lot of competition out there today because there's a lot of spas also, and there are dermatology offices that offer spa treatments. So talk to me a little bit about, you've got this unique approach, and talk to me a little bit about what the competition and the challenges are out there when you're in a space like this that might not be really clear to a lot of people. So I understand what a dermatology practice is,
Mhm.
but and I understand if I'm going to the spa to get a massage, let's say, or to get my nails done. And you're different. And so talk to me about competition and how you position yourself, and how you sort of kind of fight through maybe all the challenges that might be out there when people don't fully understand exactly what you do.
So that's a great point, and I appreciate you asking that because my practice is very unique, as you mentioned. So you could think, well, a spa is competition, but not really, because a spa is just a med spa. It's all aesthetics. Whereas I do a little bit of aesthetics, and the Sunrise sort of brand is about feeling good in the skin you're in. It's about building confidence from within, but part of that is caring for yourself. It's the self-care component. So we're not doing Botox or microneedling or Morpheus 8 so that we look better per se, but it's so that we just feel better because we're taking care of ourselves. You're doing something for yourself. But I will never tell someone that they need this or that or anything, it's more what's bothering you, what would you like to do for yourself? So my whole brand is just different. And what I love about being an entrepreneur and just being in the space of networking is that I have my people that I refer for filler and for the other procedures that I don't do. And I think it's fantastic because you build these wonderful relationships with other nurse practitioners and PAs and physicians that maybe there's a little bit of overlap, but then they do something completely different. And then same with me because I have that dermatology component. I'm dermatology certified. So, the places, med spas, they don't do skin biopsies. They don't, they won't treat vitiligo or any other autoimmune skin conditions. They won't prescribe biologics. So if they ever have any clients that need those services, they can send them to me. And so you might think to yourself, well, but wouldn't maybe they send them to another dermatology office? And so it depends. If the person is, they like individualized care, if it's someone who really likes to take care of themselves, then maybe they would be an ideal patient for my practice where it's one on one. I take my time with each person. So that med spa owner or that NP or PA knows this person's getting good quality care going to this practice. Or if they wanna use their insurance, because again, I don't know if we mentioned this, but I'm cash pay in the office, then I always completely respect that, and so they can send them to the dermatology office where they will take insurance. And then sometimes they come back. So, or they end up seeing me anyway just because of getting that experience of, "Oh, it was a 5-minute appointment, but I had 10 questions and they only answered 5," So yeah, I mean, I'm a true believer in, like, when you say competition, I don't really feel that. I feel that whenever you practice with heart and you just do what you're passionate about, the people that fit your practice will find you. And when they meet you and they get care from you, they really enjoy it. And so they just keep coming back and then they refer people that are similar to them. So then you kind of find your community. So, and I'm totally happy with everyone finding their own community. So, and if someone calls and says, "Hey, do you take my insurance?" I let them know I don't. Here's the benefits of not taking the insurance. And they say, "Oh, well, I really want to use my insurance." And I say, "Okay, well, then I'm going to refer you to my colleague down the street, or I usually ask them where they live because I know NPs and PAs all across Pinellas and Hillsborough. And I will, set them up with the practice that will be by their house or with one of my providers that practices near them." So,
I think I think that's a really good point because again, it goes back to you being clear about what you're offering and who your audience is. But I think there is a lot of power in being collaborative, especially I would think in healthcare, because patients need that holistic care. And there's going to be things maybe that are not in your line of specialty and expertise, and you can refer them and help them find that. But you mentioned the word patient, and then you quickly changed to client. Is there a distinction there? I mean, can you call the people that come to you patients, or is that just a preference? In other words, is there some legality around that?
so that's actually a good question that I should probably look more into. But in my mind, I'm thinking so when I switch from patient to client, I was thinking of the med spas. So for
Okay.
them, I kind of feel like the people that go to a med spa are clients because they're not
Okay.
really receiving healthcare. But then some would argue that aesthetic or anti-aging care is some type of healthcare. I don't know. I kind of view them as clients, similar to therapists. So I think some people call them patients and some call them clients because they're not going because they're sick. They're going to just get relief and to vent and get some guidance and help themselves to ground, so there's that kind of gray area, but in my mind personally, someone that just goes to a med spa is a client.
Yeah. That that makes sense. Now you are Sunrise Skin and Wellness. What does someone come to you for? What kinds of reasons would bring me to your spa?
So the reasons to come to Sunrise Skin and Wellness would include full skin cancer screenings or just any concerns about your skin. If you were just wanting to have a full physical exam and get your labs done, sort of have a once over to make sure that you're doing okay or to discuss any other health issues. I don't advertise myself as like a medical home as they call primary care sometimes. I encourage people to have their primary care, but if you can't get in right away, I can take care of you if you have an ear infection, just basic things. I can help my patients with that. For aesthetics, I do Botox, microneedling, and Morpheus 8, which is microneedling with radiofrequency. All three of these procedures are to enhance your natural beauty and your natural appearance. They don't change the way you look at all. So the microneedling and Morpheus 8 help to boost collagen formation, elastin formation, just to give your skin a nice tune up. Because as we age, all those things start to decrease. I treat acne, rosacea, autoimmune skin conditions are one of my specialties. I used to work in research in dermatology as well. So vitiligo, plaque psoriasis, let's see, atopic dermatitis as well, prurigo nodularis, hidradenitis suppurativa, and skin tag removal. So just from basic things to more complicated things. Also nail disease and hair loss as well. So all those different things. And then I also do in the wellness space as well, I do weight loss.
Okay. So, living in Florida, we've got maybe a higher risk. I don't know. You tell me of skin cancer and other skin kinds of aging. So, what should somebody out there, who wants to make sure that they're taking care of their skin in the sun and, or if they feel like they've got, something that they may be a little worried about, patients come to you for skin cancer reviews, or, what do you recommend in that arena to ensure that I mean, besides wearing sunscreen? And then I know some screens are good, some aren't bad, but what are a few of the things that you recommend to your clients?
So the first thing, if anyone's ever worried about anything on their skin, to make an appointment with either their dermatologist or of course they can call my office. But definitely it's painless to have a skin check. And it's important, even if it's nothing, to just have that peace of mind is very important. Skin checks are usually once a year, but they can be more frequent if a person's had skin cancer before or precancers, or if there's a family history of melanoma. That is a very significant risk factor for melanoma. And of course, heavy tanning bed use is also a significant risk factor. So, being out in the sun in Florida, I would say definitely take it seriously. UV ray damage is real. The number one enemy of the skin is the sun. So, if you want to prevent premature aging, prevent splotchiness and dark spots and early wrinkling, then sunscreen anytime you're going to be outside. And even if so, people that work from home, if you work with a window next to a window, even the UV rays from the window can affect your skin. So if you think, oh, well, I work from home inside, you still need to wear your daily sunscreen and reapply every 2 hours. And mineral sunscreen is the best. We don't like chemical sunscreen, it's bad for the environment. And the aerosol sunscreen, you can actually breathe that in. So that's not very good for you either. And also they have found some of those chemical sunscreens actually can disrupt the hormonal balance in your body. And I mean, you'd have to really use quite a bit, but that's what it's shown. So if you do have to wear sunscreen a lot, keep that in mind. We do not want the chemical sunscreens.
Yeah, that's a good reminder, and I think living in Florida, we just get it, just
True.
walking to and from the car. So let's switch gears a little bit, Patricia. I love all this, and I love what you're doing. I think it's really important, and I love that you're here in St. Petersburg, Tampa Bay area, providing this service. As you transitioned into your own business, what were some of the challenges that you met as someone coming, just wanting to serve your patients and provide the kind of information that we were just talking about? What were some of the biggest challenges that you met going from working for somebody else to having your own business?
The biggest challenge is probably has been in my own head. When you finally do leave that job and you realize there's not a check coming in every 2 weeks, it's scary. And it makes it so much scarier when you hit certain roadblocks. So, for example, I was looking for a location and I found this spot. And at that time, I was actually going to partner with a licensed mental health counselor. Like that's how passionate I am about mental health. We were going to partner together and basically work out of the same office. And we found this spot in this building and it was beautiful. The property manager was like, yeah, absolutely. I'll send you, send me this. I'll send you the contract. And then I didn't hear from her after a few days and I emailed her and it turns out, and I had already ordered my business cards. Like I was going full force. We were so excited. And then she wrote back and said, I'm so sorry, but the landlord, so the owner of the building didn't want anyone that did skin stuff. And I was like, skin stuff? And I was kind of taken aback. Like, I'm a doctorally prepared nurse practitioner. Like, this is serious and we're going to take care of people. And so I sent them my CV. And I wrote them a letter and, basically just like, please, I can assure you. And my husband and I own a couple of properties as well. So I was like, trust me as a landlord myself, I promise you will be respectful. And they said, no, 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 no matter what I said or tried to do in my CV and everything. And so I felt like I got the door slammed in my face and I was so excited because it was, maybe 6 minutes from my house and it's on a main road here in St. Pete. And yeah, so after that happened, I was like, what if I went back and worked for someone? And so I looked at a couple of practices in St. Pete and then I imagined myself requesting time off and I was like, nope, keep looking for a new spot. And then I'll say this, like everything happens for a reason. That's always been like a saying of mine since like high school. Everything happens for a reason because I ended up finding another spot that was 4 minutes from my house. So even closer to my house. And then that one actually fell through as well. I was there and I wasn't even really physically there because the lady supposedly was going to build it out. She promised the moon and like delivered nothing. But thankfully it was like a month to month lease. And so in one weekend, I made the decision to cut it off. And the gym where I was working out from, they had just leased the unit next to theirs. And they were like, "Oh, it'd be so great if you rented the space here," because they had planned to build it out. And the day that they finally finished building it out was the day that I made the decision not to just leave the other place, moved all my stuff, and now I'm 3 minutes from my house. So, yeah, it all works out, you know? But so
Well,
yeah, and
that's a
so
great go ahead.
I was
I'm
just gonna
sorry.
say, so that when those things happen, you kinda think to yourself, "Man, this is so much harder than you think it's gonna be." And it's like I hadn't even really started seeing patients. I was doing a couple of mobile things, like mobile microneedling, mobile Botox, but yeah, so you kinda think to yourself, "Am I supposed to be doing this? Was this the right decision?" But then things sort of fall in line, and now I'm 3 minutes from my house.
That's a great story, and, I think it demonstrates as an entrepreneur, you have to have that resilience and that perseverance to keep going. Sometimes it takes 3 times, right? 3 times the charm or
3
whatever
times, yeah, 3
to
times
get
the
to the
charm.
right spot. But, as you, I think, already pointed out, this was even a better spot. It worked out for a reason. So to have a skin and wellness center like you do, you have to have a location. You have to deal with hiring people. You have to put together, you have to bring together all the services that need to be taken care of. Like you have to have a billing service, and I guess, or maybe you take cash only. Maybe you've addressed some of that, but talk to me about hiring people and getting all the systems in place. Once you've got your location, was it challenging to find the right people? Was it challenging to get all the equipment and the systems and everything that you had to have?
So for the equipment and the system, so the EHR was a big and is a big investment for me. And I had already like checked out a couple of different systems because I actually
And
helped.
yeah, you
Yes, the
explain
electronic
what
health
you're,
record. Yep.
yeah,
Yep. Or
electronic
some.
health records. So for anybody
Exactly, or
listening,
EMR,
yeah.
electronic medical record. So it's basically the software that we use or the system where we do all of our charting, the scheduling. Some of these systems can do the billing, they can send reminders. So it's sort of, there's like free ones that you can get online that it's kind of the bare minimum. And then, the price goes up as you add more and more features to it. Mine is somewhat expensive, I guess. People have told me it's kind of pricey, but I think because it is designed to accommodate insurance. So when I write my notes and I put in diagnoses, it will tag it with ICD-10 codes. And if I do procedures, it will tag it with CPT codes if I want it to. And that was important to me because if someone did want to use their insurance, like you can still come and see me and I can print out the super bill of what we did and they can always submit it themselves to their insurance. So I just don't have a lot of faith in that because I know how insurance companies are. So, but I've done that for a couple of patients. So that was important to me to have that capability. So getting the EHR, I personally believe in a lean business. So when I started, I was doing everything. Then as I got busier, I did hire a virtual assistant to handle my phone calls, do my scheduling. She helped me with my social media. She redesigned my website. She and I started doing a monthly newsletter and she was fantastic and phenomenal and wonderful. But due to like the circumstances of where she's from and living, we weren't able to continue working together. And I had hired her through a VA company. It was another female entrepreneur who focused on Latin American virtual assistants, which I thought was fantastic because I also speak Spanish and I want my practice to be accessible to the Latin community. And but long story short, there was a non-compete, so we waited some time before I rehired her as my assistant, but now she just does my newsletter, helps me with certain posts on social media, and she does my blog. She helps me post my blog posts. And yeah, so we do still work together in that capacity. And then I have another assistant who's more of a personal assistant, but she helps me with other things. But if I go out of town, I have her answer my phones. So
So building out your all your systems and getting all the people in place took a little while, but your goal, you said you're not you wanted to be more of a solo entrepreneur. So talk to me about why that was the case. I mean, why was it important to you to be hands-on and involved in everything and keep your business really, small and in terms of numbers of people and investments in systems and other kinds of things, especially people though, I guess.
So my whole idea of the lean business, it goes back to the principle of never feeling pressured to do anything that doesn't feel right in your heart or, is not right with your ethics and values. And it doesn't always have to come from a private equity company. You can do it to yourself. There's some people that start their own business and they fall in love with all these lasers and all these things that these salespeople will try and sell you. And then all of a sudden you've got an overhead of $10,000 a month and you just started. So now, yeah, you're going to really feel like you have to sell, sell, sell. And I just don't believe in that. I want lean business, low overhead so that whenever I'm seeing someone and sitting with them, I'm not thinking about that I need to sell anything or absolutely nothing. I'm there to just hold space for my patient, listen to what's going on, however I can help them. Maybe I need to refer them out, just really being present. I feel like that helps me personally, is just not having to worry about that. So that's where the lean business comes in. And I am going to scale eventually. I'm very short on space in my current, the way my office is built out. So I actually went on Indeed and I was going to hire a medical assistant so that I could start more efficiently seeing more patients, but there's just not enough space right now and it doesn't make sense. So my project for 2025 is to build out the office, have more exam rooms, partner with another nurse practitioner, maybe my therapist friend, we're talking, so we're probably going to get back together to incorporate therapy. Yeah, so but always staying lean and kind of building the foundation. And you mentioned about being like hands on with my business. I'm also a believer that if you're going to be like a CEO of McDonald's, you better know how to flip burgers. You better know how to clean the toilets. You have to have been a manager, own the store and like build your way up. Because how are you supposed to relate or know what's going on in your store if you've never even done it before? So I like that I'm my own medical assistant. I have to vacuum my office right now. So, just like doing everything. I decorate, I have to do my own inventory. So yeah, it's good. So then that way, when I do bring people on, it's like, well, here's how I was doing it. And I'm going to be completely open to people saying, well, you could do it better. I'll say, thank you for telling me that. Cause when I do build out my team, it's going to be like kind of all hands on deck. We're all together on this, with the same goal of just building a beautiful community where patients and employees, I don't like that word, but team members feel welcome and just happy to be here.
Yeah. I love that, and I love where you went because I was going to ask you what was the future of what you were building. So I love it. But what I really like about it, you talked about something we call in entrepreneurship bootstrapping, and that is, keeping all of your costs to a minimum to do what you need to do. And sometimes when you're over resourced, in other words, you've got too much money, you spend it in ways that you don't really need to or you don't understand. So businesses can often be more creative and innovative if they don't have a lot of extra slack resources around. And I think you had that situation earlier in your career where the money just started to become the primary goal and you didn't want to replicate that. And it can happen, and I guess the lesson in it for a lot of entrepreneurs listening is to be very intentional about how you want to build your business out. This is one way. There's certainly many other ways, but being intentional about building it out so that you don't lose sight of that problem you're solving and how you're solving it and what gives you your competitive or distinctive advantage. And I think in your case, it's about the passion you bring to patient care. And there's a lot to be said for what you just said there, being able to sweep your own floor so that you know what that feels like. I had an entrepreneur who just recently interviewed him, and he has a food delivery service. And we talked about the challenges of getting people to deliver food, people that are dependable. And he said, well, I have delivered over 600 meals myself personally. So I understand the problems that those people are facing and the challenges they face. And so I feel like I'm better able to manage that process and get the right people and understand who I need to get in that driver's seat delivering because I've done it. So, I think there's some real power in that, and we forget that. We get removed from it, don't we? Sometimes.
I remember I interviewed the head, or she was like the VP of hiring, or I guess HR, for my former employer, because I do coach, like, I like to post about how to get into dermatology, and I coach people on that as well. And so I interviewed her, and she said the number one, or they like really gravitate towards nurse practitioners and PAs that used to be medical assistants. And they say they find they have the least amount of problems because there's always like some drama with like the providers and the medical assistants, and but they say they find that they have the best outcomes when the NP or PA used to be a medical assistant because they just get along better because they get it, you know? So I thought that was really interesting.
Empathy, it's about having empathy, I think, and that's really important. Now you also have a not-for-profit, Sunrise NPPA Derm. Tell me about the not-for-profit, and for anybody listening, maybe what that process was for applying, because I know a lot of people don't understand what a not-for-profit is. It's basically a tax status for an entity. And why would you start a not for profit? And what's the mission and the vision behind that?
So I started Sunrise and PPA Derm as a way to bring nurse practitioners and PAs together to learn together, to grow together, to inspire each other, and to keep the care in healthcare. So earlier we talked about how working for certain employers, for private equity companies, for giant corporations can lead us to start to change the way we practice. And so Sunrise and PPA Derm exists to help educate and empower us to maintain our integrity, maintain our values so that we can say no when we get those pressures, so that we can stay strong. And you might be thinking, well, but how? You still pay the bills, you know? And the way is we inspire people and we try and expose people to other opportunities. So entrepreneurship is one of them, and in different ways too. So speaking for industry, or speaking on podium, or writing for publications, coaching, starting a podcast, investing in real estate, investing in the stock market. We have financial advisors come to our dinners to be guest speakers. And for our conference, this is our second year. We're going to have, she's a PA that became a financial coach, like a financial advisor. So it's like, oh, perfect. And it's to help us build that passive income, that financial freedom, because for me personally, that was the biggest thing. And to be able to just build my lean business the way I wanted to was because, as I mentioned, my husband and I have rental properties. So there wasn't that pressure of, okay, I need to be really making this money so we can pay the mortgage. Our mortgage is paid for by the couple of rental properties, you know? So it's like, when you have that, even if I was still working for my former employer, I could still just put my foot down and say, no, this is what I'm going to do. Because if they fire me, well, it's fine because I have my cushion. And so I just feel like that really gives people freedom and value. As nurse practitioners and PAs, we are such a voice. We're such a unit in healthcare. You know, we're becoming the new thing. As you said, they're getting into the different specialties. Your primary care provider is probably now an NP or PA. And so by encouraging us to advocate, to join our local and national organizations, to empower each other, we're kind of building ourselves as an authority, as the authority that we are in healthcare. And I don't know. I don't like to say taking a stand against private equity, but yeah, taking a stand.
Well, there's several things in here I want to ask you about, but I love that What it sounds like to me you did was create your own network to work together towards a vision and a mission that you saw as being problematic for your industry. So I love that you did that. I think it's important for our listeners maybe to get a little bit of a lesson on what is the difference between a nurse practitioner and a physician's assistant. You use NP and PA. What is the difference between those two? And why would you put those 2 together for this particular purpose?
So the difference between PAs and nurse practitioners, physician assistant follows like the physician model. So remember earlier we talked about like the two branches. So nursing is built on the nursing philosophy of caring and the whole person. So nursing is kind of its own branch of medicine. Physician assistants were developed alongside physicians or basically as a complement to physicians. So they practice more the medicine model. However, their schooling is different. And I feel like it's like sometimes I wonder if medical school or the residencies, like really the patriarchy of all that stuff kind of makes people lose sight of, like the heart of medicine. Because I feel like PAs are very similar to nurse practitioners in that they've done studies where they do spend more time with patients. They do sit and, do more education. So physicians, or sorry, PAs, they do not go to medical school, but they go to PA school. So I'll do a quick rundown of the education. A PA goes and does a 4-year bachelor's degree, and it can be in different topics like biology or microbiology. Some people have done pre-med and just chosen to go to PA school. There are even nurses that decide to go to PA school. But so you do 4-year bachelor's, and then PA school is 2 years. But you do need to have some like patient contact hours. So most people will be doing scribing or they work as a medical assistant before they go to PA school. And then nurses, again, they follow the nursing model. So it's nursing school, you work as a nurse, and then masters, etc. So that's the difference. But some people just sort of like bunch them up, and we call them advanced practice providers. I think corporate America has termed them mid-level providers because in corporations, like the middle managers are called mid-levels, but that doesn't exist in healthcare. It's not a chain like that. We're all a team. So there's no mid-level about anything with NPs or PAs or occupational therapists or physical therapists or respiratory therapy. Like we're all a team. So there's no mid-level. It is advanced practice providers because that's what we are. We have that foundational education and then we got advanced education so that we can prescribe, we can order imaging. PAs don't have as much autonomy as nurse practitioners currently, but I know in some states, it might be a few that now they have some autonomy. I'm not sure, but they are fighting for it. So they're kind of along the same track as nurse practitioners as far as fighting for autonomy. Once you've worked for a certain amount of time under, like with the physician, with their guidance, and the funny thing is, it's like we all kind of we're texting each other, we call each other, we have our journal clubs, we're always collaborating. Like, even though I technically on paper don't have a collaborating physician, I absolutely have my network of physicians that when I have a tough case, I can text them, I can call them. I have other NP colleagues that we share cases. We're not on an island. So yeah, so NPs and PAs in a nutshell, but I liked the idea of bringing them together because sometimes I feel like physicians or those organizations try to pit us against each other. Like, oh, nurse practitioners are better. Oh, PAs are better. No, no, no. Let's not lose sight of what's really happening here. And honestly, sometimes a part of me is like, man, I should have put like somehow physician in this organization to include them too, because we're all in this together. We're all in this with the same goal of taking care of people, taking care of patients and providing the best care that we can the way that we were taught to.
Yeah, I love that, and I think, I applaud that you're trying to bring everybody together so that, with one vision, one mission, and all of it around providing better patient care. I love your story. I love what you're doing. I'm so impressed by the passion that you bring to this, and I think it's very interesting. And I think all of us out here as consumers of healthcare can benefit from having a little bit more knowledge about the system and how it works and what we can actually expect when we have a certain kind of provider, whether that's our actual, a physician, or whether it's a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant, or some other actor, if you will, in the healthcare system. And I think it's remarkable and wonderful to see your goal and your vision. As I listen to you talk, I see all those traits of an entrepreneurial mindset. And when I met with nurses at the conference where we met, and I was at another one, not, a month or so before, I just found it really interesting about the passion that I saw in nurses. And I think turning that into good, and as someone who comes from the business community, being able to bring some support to that and learn from you as well and share that with our audience has been a real treat and real honor for me today. I know we could talk more. I know you've got patients to see. So I'd like to ask you, before we end our conversation and I let you get back to your practice, what would be, if you had one piece of advice to give to somebody who might be considering a path similar to what you've taken, maybe something you wish you had been told or known, what would that one piece of advice be, Patricia?
My piece of advice would be, if you really want to do it and you're passionate about it, to go for it and believe in yourself.
I think that's great. A lot of people think they have to know how to do it before they start, but none of us do, right? Because it changes along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And sometimes we might feel like you look at other people and it's like, wow, they seem like they know what's going on or they know what they're doing. But we're all just out here trying to do the best we can, and networking should be top priority because it's just such a wonderful community when everyone's helping each other and you can learn from each other. And yeah, and I love your podcast. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you, Patricia. And I really appreciate you joining me today. This has been a treat. Where can our listeners connect with you, find out more about you, find out more about Sunrise Skin and Wellness? And maybe there's some nurse practitioners or physician's assistants out there that would like to know more about your not-for-profit Sunrise NPPA Derm. So where can we find you?
So for my practice, my website is sunriseskinandwellness.com. And for the nonprofit, it's sunrisederm.org.
Thank you for joining me today, Patricia. It's been a delight.
Thank you so much, Dr. White. I really enjoyed being on your podcast.
Thanks for joining me for this episode of The In Factor. If you'd like to learn more about Patricia's work, you can visit sunriseskinandwellness.com for her practice, or sunrisederm.org to learn more about her nonprofit, not-for-profit, and how she's building a more collaborative future in healthcare. And I would love it if you would subscribe and share this podcast with someone in your life who may need to take a step forward toward their own passion. And until next time, stay resilient, stay curious, and keep choosing yourself.